Hello, everybody, and welcome to another electrifying edition of the Spooky Story Spectacular. This will be part 2. Last year we had part 1. This year I'm going to stick to 1 hour. I'm going to be a good girl. I'm going to focus. I'm not going to tell my whole life story. So, that being said, let's get right into it. You will hear the pitter-patter of Oscar in the background as he begs for his dinner since I just walked in the door. But he does have some food left, so just to be clear. It's awesome to be with all of you again. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. I look forward to this every year, and I hope you do too. Quick sales pitch. I do have my virtual tip jar here in the description in case you would like to contribute anything. I don't have a Patreon. I do all of this for free here when I do my storytelling sessions on Facebook and elsewhere, and all the content that I offer on my blog. So I did the virtual tip jar in case you want to get me a coffee or a glass of wine or a candy bar for Halloween, whatever. So this has been a really fantastic year. It's been an interesting year. I was very light on spooky season because I changed jobs and just there's been a lot going on. So I have kind of kept it easy breezy, beautiful cover girl this Halloween, but I have had a little bit of FOMO, so I'm looking forward to coming back strong. However, I did have a banner year throughout the spring and summer. Let me recap. Just for fun and giggles, I was on Coast to Coast AM, which I think was probably the most exciting thing that I embarked upon this year. I was also on television. I was on multiple episodes of Chicago Med and Fire and PD. Some of them were a little bit more of a Where's Waldo than others. Some of them I was featured extra. I was also on Spaced Out Radio, which was mega cool. Epic Realms. I went to Tinker Swiss Cottage, Chicago Paranormal Convention, the Old Baraboo Inn 160th anniversary celebration, Paranormal Research Symposium in Gettysburg, which was like the feather in my cap for a lot of different things. I've been working on a lot of really neat research that's going to be published, that has been published and will be published very soon. So part of that will be part of that has been published already. Part of that will come out in Haunted Magazine this next month. Well, next month is November, so I think November or December it's going to be coming out, and then in January the Paranormal Research Symposium will be publishing its journal, and so everything I've done with the Legacy of Lore will be released all together in one place, which I'm really excited about. Hi Larry, hi Antonio, it is so great to have you all here, and just, recapping everything that has been exciting about this year. And then next year I'm looking forward to making my triumphant spooky season return, and I already have some cool stuff on deck. I'm going to be on season 4 of The Bear as well, and other fun filming projects, secret things that I can't tell you about, not background related, but paranormal history, folklore, haunted history related, that I'm super excited to bring you as well. Something else that I have been working on this season that has been really, that I've been tuning up for a long time, is working on my psychic abilities and kind of fine-tuning my mediumship. And in fact, I am feeling a presence right now. Whoa, Chuck! Oh.
Hello!
Whew. Everybody, it's Ground Chuck. Hey Chuck, tell us the news.
Well, what am I working on?
That is what the question that I was going to ask you. Are you psychic too, Chuck?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, Chuck, tell us what's coming up in 2025 for our friend Ground Chuck and my co-host on Amelia's Spooky Story Boutique on YouTube.
Whew, wow, what am I working on? Well, it's an amalgamation of numerous disciplines, really. It's a bit hush-hush, but let's just say it involves wood. You see, I realize my relationship with wood has evolved. I wanted to break down not just the wood itself, but what the wood represents. After all, what is wood? Merely something to gnaw? Or something more? I can't disclose much, but I'm collaborating with some of the most reputable minds in the burrowing world. It's quite a feat. But when the time is right, all will be revealed. Just know it's going to be groundbreaking in the woodchuck community. Well, gotta run. I mean burrow. Bye, Emilio.
Mwah. Bye, Chuck. Well, that was interesting. That was very deep. Mounds of information there, and Chuck is always a chuckle fest, if I do say so myself. I'm looking forward to whatever the hell he's talking about, plus bringing us more awesome, wholesome content with, what did we have? On Amelia's Spooky Story Boutique, we've got On the Ground with Ground Chuck, 1 Minute Mysteries with Ground Chuck, and then I have been doing my much less boring, or much less exciting, much more boring Spooky Story Express, which is still awesome, so tune in, and my poetry corner. I always have my poetry corner, so that's all on my YouTube channel. And of course, Chuck is the breakout star of YouTube this year. Who else do we have? Oh my gosh, hi Mark. Yes, Chuck always has an issue with names, Larry. He's such a genius. He's so deep in his feelings that, you know, the world, we are not thinking he's in 3024, we're still in 2024. So that was Ground Chuck, everybody. I just wish that Jonathan would be here to see him sometime. So I'm only here for the booze, folks. I want to quickly go over my recommended reading, which is also tradition. We will make this fast. Something that has been super duper exciting for me this year is that I got to see Mr. Ballin live. I am a huge Mr. Ballin super fan, and so I was able to get his strange, dark, and mysterious graphic stories as part of the full package of seeing him doing his storytelling live at the Chicago Theater, which was rad. You too can get your copy on Amazon. I also read The Secret History of Bigfoot, which is not written by a Bigfooter, somebody from outside of the community who did a lot of research into this. I loved this book. I had issues with this book as well. He spends a lot of time sort of like criticizing the Bigfoot community while also not taking people's stories, I think, seriously enough. Like, he sort of went a little too hard on trying to debunk so that real serious people will take him seriously. But then he ends the book, spoiler alert, with the impetus behind writing the book, which was his Bigfoot encounter. So I think some of his criticisms were maybe a little tongue-in-cheek. It's a really great read, though. Something to add to your shelf if you are a cryptid fan like myself. And then shout out to Sylvia Schultz. I got this book, Fractured Spirits, Hauntings at the Peoria State Hospital, last October. Yes, when I saw her at Midwest Spirit Fest, and this was a lovely read as well. I like her writing style. It's kind of similar to mine, where she kind of like tosses in, hi, welcome. She kind of tosses in like her personal touch and her personal tone and her personal stories along with her research and everything, which I always appreciate. So shout out to Sylvia Schultz, as always, a queen in the paranormal realm. So let's kick it off. I promised I was going to do an hour. We're 11 minutes in. I'm going to do this thing. It wouldn't be a spooky storytelling session with me if I didn't include scary stories. So this year, I kept it straight, narrowed down the middle. We are going to, I sort of picked one, so I have 3 books to read from, and then 1 personal story from the vault, but I've typed it so that you don't have to listen to me ramble. And, so we've got 1 haunted house story, 1, I think, creature story, and then 1 UFO story. So something for everybody. So I'm going to read The Haunted House from, one day I'll figure this out, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It's not that dark in here because I need to see to read, so... All right. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire, and lit a lamp. Sat there reading the Bible. Then just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. Then there was a lot of thrashing around and struggling, and finally, everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut, easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went to mending the fire. Then the haunt started walking again and step, step, step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" And one of my favorite illustrations. The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do, and then she just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly. Step, 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 step. Closer and closer. Step, step. It was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you, and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, and the flesh was dropping off her face so he could see the bones and part of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in her eye sockets, and she had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for money and buried her in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand and lay it in the collection plate at the church the next day, and he'd find out who had murdered her. One more time with the illustration. And she said, "If you come back here once more after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid, and you can give it to the church." The church. The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at that bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him on to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to that house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearth rock. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held on to his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. That was the haunted house from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Now, if only paranormal investigations would yield such results, huh? Let's do one of my favorites real quick. We'll pause for spooky talk, which is literally for children, and I don't care. We're doing it. So I'm going to pick out a card. Ooh. Okay, this one's a good one. Some of them are cornier than others. This one says, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, is considered by some to be the most haunted location in the United States. At the place where over 50,000 people were killed during the three-day battle, reports of hauntings and apparitions are numerous. What other locations would you expect to be filled with ghosts, and why? So what locations, feel free to cheat if you are a ghost hunter, let me know, what other locations are filled with ghosts? And you can answer anytime. I will keep track of the comments as best I can. The next story that we are going to read, now if only, I'm sensing a presence again. I'm sensing the presence of a spirit that wants to bring me a tissue. Spirit, if you're here, will you please bring me a tissue? I'm notorious for sniffling on these things. My allergies, my seasonal allergies are the most fun. And if only I had like a helpful house ghost or something, or like a, if I had like a, oh, Chuck! Thank you so much. Chuck, you didn't let me give you a kiss last time, okay?
Oh, no.
And I can't have that, so let me give you a little, let me lay one on you. Whoa.
Right on the mouth.
Did you see him go in? He went in for the full mouth. Okay. Thank you so much, Chuck.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. This next story, I've got Chuck hair in my mouth now. This next story is called The Loup-garou, or the werewolf, from French-Canadian folklore. Stop me if you've heard this one. And this one comes to us from Short and Shivery, which you all know is my other favorite collection from my childhood that I read and just love, and found it again, and I'm so titillated to have a copy of it once more. So, one sip. Every time I sniffle, take a drink. All right. In the old time in Canada, people believed the werewolf, which they called the loup-garou, haunted graveyards and prowled the woods and waited in the brush beside lonely trails to catch unwary travelers and gobble them up. There was an old couple living on a farm far out in the country. One wintry night, Martha took very ill, and her husband, Pierre, had to go fetch the doctor in town. This meant a long journey through the woods. But Pierre was too worried about his wife to hesitate. He hitched up his horse to his sleigh and set out through the lightly falling snow. As he went along, he could hear nothing except the scrunch of snow under the sleigh's runners and the horse's hoofs. The old man wasn't thinking of anything except getting help for Marta as fast as he could. They were now on a long way into the woods. Moonlight shone on the snow, which lay thick on the ground and on branches of the pine trees all around. Sometimes from deep in the shadows would come the sharp report of an icy heavy branch snapping and dropping to the ground. Once Pierre heard an owl hooting. Except for these sounds, silence lay heavily over the forest. The road ahead was level and easy enough for the horse, but suddenly the animal began to slow down. Pierre shook the reins and shouted, "Get up!" But the horse was hardly moving at all now. It was as if it was pulling a 2-ton load, rather than the little sleigh with its single passenger. The old man flicked his whip, but the horse merely shook its head and made a frightened little whinny. The poor animal was breathing rapidly, his warm breath making clouds like the steam from a steamboat's chimney. Sweat was running down his flank. Now Pierre could feel some of the horse's fear sinking into him. Then there was a low growl just behind him that stood his hair on end. Turning, he discovered what looked like a great big black dog or wolf, its teeth and claws of its forepaws sunk into the back of the sleigh, its hind paws dragging onto the ground, bringing the sled nearly to a halt. For one terrible moment Pierre stared directly into the creature's burning yellow eyes. Then, almost without thinking, he cracked his whip across the monster's snout. The wolf gave a howl of pain and loosened its hold on the sleigh for a moment. In that instant, the horse lunged forward and ran as if all the devils from hell were in pursuit. Looking over his shoulder, Pierre could see the shadowy creature bounding down the road close behind. The man knew that unless his guardian angel was riding with him that night, it was all over for him. He didn't need to urge the horse to go faster. The animal was so scared that he galloped like a hurricane, but for all that, the monster was getting closer and closer, and the creature gave a tremendous leap and landed on the back of the sleigh. The thump of the impact and the sudden weight on the end of the sleigh sent it sliding first to one side of the road, then the other. For a moment Pierre thought he was going to crash, but miraculously the sleigh kept upright on its runners and found the center of the road again. Here's this illustration, which I love. The werewolf looks like a real wolf, and I find that cool. The horse, now crazy with fear, somehow managed to keep from falling in the icy road, often blocked with drifts of snow. The wolf was growling as it crept toward the old man, who had turned to face the beast. Pierre tried using his whip again, but the monster caught it in his huge jaws, severing it as if it were no more than a twig, and tossing it over the edge of the wildly careening sleigh. Old Pierre felt for his hunting knife and pulled it free just as the wolf sprang at him and slammed the man to the bottom of the sleigh. His forepaws were on Pierre's shoulders, pinning him to the floorboards. The man felt his bones were likely to break under the weight of the monster. For one terrible instant, he felt the creature's whiskers brush his face like needles, felt its hot breath on his throat, saw its yellow eyes only inches from his own. Then, with a prayer, he jabbed at the thing with his hunting knife. Though his movement was hampered by the weight of the monster on top of him, he managed to nick it just enough to draw blood, so a spot of red appeared on its pelt. Instantly the creature reared back, howling like nothing Pierre had ever heard before. Then, to the old man's astonishment, the wolf turned into a man. Right away, Pierre knew that this was indeed a loup-garou, because the stories say if you draw blood from the loup-garou, he'll turn back to a man right off and run away. Pressing his big pale hand to his side, the man suddenly leapt from the sleigh. Pierre saw him rolling down a hillside through the snow where the forest shadows quickly hid him. Then the sleigh was out of the woods and heading toward the sleeping town ahead. Shaking, Pierre returned his knife to its holster and took hold of the reins, gradually easing the horse back to a trot, saying, "Easy, easy." When they reached the gate of the doctor's house, Pierre quickly roused the man, who thought at first the old man was the one who was sick because he was so pale and trembling. But when Pierre told what had happened, the doctor gave him a shot of whiskey. Then they roused the village priest, who gave them holy water and a cross as protection for their journey back through the woods. Pierre never saw the loup-garou again, but Martha, when she recovered, made him promise never to travel through the woods alone at night, and the old man was only too happy to give her his word that he never would. All right, one more time with this groovy illustration. That's from Short and Shivery, 30 Chilling Tales by Robert D. Sansucci. I think that is how you pronounce it. And then, of course, we had Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz with drawings by Stephen Gamble. Let me see if I missed any hellos. I think I got everybody. I can't see the top comment that says hello there. Who is this person? Oh, okay, that was Antonio. Fantastic. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. If you're just tuning in now, the Spooky Talk question of the night is Gettysburg is one of the most haunted places in the United States. What other places do you know of that are supposed to be very haunted, or where you would expect to see ghosts? Me and my eternal allergies. When I am a ghost and you ask me to show you a sign, it will be sniffling. Trust me. Hey, Johnny. All right. How's everybody doing? How is everybody's spooky season going so far? Mine has been splendiferous. So even though I did not go to the normal breadth and depth of conventions that I'm used to attending, I had a really nice time just kind of enjoying the season as a spectator rather than as a busy, crazed person. So that has been really cool. And yeah, so I'm having a good atmospheric time. The next story that we're going to read is going to come from one of my books, Maryland Ghosts, Paranormal Encounters in the Free State. I try to pick stories that I haven't read before, and sometimes I think I succeed, other times I think I fail. I think I have shared one of the other UFO stories before, but not these. These come from my Uncle Bernie and my mom and that side of the family. And Johnny's eating a ghost pepper cheese bread sandwich, which sounds like it is very hot. I don't think I can eat hot stuff like that anymore. I sound like an old lady. All right. UFOs in the skies. And these stories come to us from Wheaton in Montgomery County and Frederick in Frederick County. Frederick is where I went to school. Hood College. Big up to Hood College. Hood proud. All right. So my uncle brings us these tales. My Uncle Bernie's numerous encounters with the paranormal include 3 very detailed UFO sightings. Interestingly, the first 2 sightings occurred in the 1950s when the U.S. was experiencing the height of its fascination with and fears about outer space. The Cold War, the space program, and a number of films speculating on the possible outcome of alien invasions, including The Day the Earth Stood Still and War of the Worlds, captivated Americans. His third sighting, which occurred more recently in 1993, took place over the vicinity of the Fort Detrick military base near Frederick. This incident conjures up the common UFO question. Are UFOs attracted to our armed forces and communicating with them, or are they actually designed by our armed forces, performing top-secret missions that civilians must never find out about? I'll let you read the accounts, or in this case listen to them, and decide. This is my Uncle Bernie's words. It was the summer of 1958, and I was 11 years old, mowing our backyard at Vivian Place in Wheaton. My sister Patty came running for me as something was wrong, and my mom was very upset. As I turned to head for the front yard, I saw Mom looking up at the sky. At first I couldn't see anything, as I was looking too high. I reached Mom, and she said, "There, Bernie, there it is, near the telephone pole by our driveway." I looked and saw a large white sphere that had a bluish undertone to it. The sphere seemed to be drawing power from the electric cables in the telephone pole, as there was some sort of static line from the sphere to the cables and a low crackling noise. It was amazing to see this in broad daylight. I don't know how long the sphere had been there. Mom seemed unable to move, as if transfixed to the sight. After moments, the sphere drifted skyward and headed north until it disappeared. Mom and Patty had seen it. Your mother Louise, my mom, and Uncle Chris had seen it. I had seen it, and your Uncle Tony was not born yet. We finally got Mom to go inside to cool off. We put her in her favorite chair, put her feet up, got her some iced tea, and she started chain-smoking cigarettes to settle down. I believe she was in shock. One other neighbor child may have seen it with us, Gretchen, who lived across the street and always played with Patty and Louise. I do remember late that night when Dad returned home from work. Mom tried to explain what we had seen, and she was still emotional. Dad asked me what I saw, and I told him. The other children were already in bed. I doubt any of us got much sleep that night. Later that summer, in late July, early August, I was preparing to head for the woods to go fishing and catch frogs. I looked up at the sky and saw a cigar-shaped object traveling from east to west at a great distance and at a tremendous rate of speed. I compared the speed to a small airplane that was flying low in the same direction, and a jet plane also flying in the same direction and leaving a vapor trail in the sky. The UFO seemed to fly between the 2 airplanes, between in quotes, noted, yet not close to them at all. I was amazed at the speed this UFO had. I watched it until it disappeared from some clouds, and I never saw it come out from the other side. Sometime in 1993, I was driving home to Hagerstown from Rockville. I was passing through Frederick on Route 270 when I got about to where there was an overlook. I could see a circular-shaped object in the clear sky standing still in midair over Fort Detrick near Frederick. At first, since I was moving, I thought the UFO was moving too. Not until I pulled my vehicle over and parked did I realize the UFO was not moving at all. I stayed in my vehicle and looked at the UFO through some hunting binoculars that I kept in the back seat. It appeared to be oval in shape and grayish-brown in color. I observed it for about 15 minutes until it seemed to disappear behind or into a cloud. What's fascinating about this, as well as the other UFO story featured in this book, which comes from my Aunt Patty, and that is when my Uncle Tony was born. He was about 5 years old when this incident happened, is that every single person on my mom's side of the family, except for my grandfather, had these UFO experiences, and in some cases more than once. And I have been giving more thought to that with regard to the types of paranormal experiences that I've had that have been prevalent in my family history, and sort of starting to look at more patterns like that. So has anybody answered the question? Nobody wants to answer the question, where do you think there will be a lot of spirits? Let me pick a different spooky talk card since we're not vibing with that one, which is fine. Ooh, here's a good one. Okay. Some of the spookiest horror stories in American fiction and film come from the vivid imagination of Stephen King. In dozens of works, King's monstrous characters like Carrie are ordinary people who are capable of extraordinary evil. Who is your favorite author of science fiction or horror fiction? Okay, so who's your favorite author of science fiction or horror fiction? Put it in the comments. Write anything in the comments. Tell me your favorite horror movie in the comments. I know that Jonathan's current favorite horror movie is Terrifier, which we just watched the other night, and he said he loved it, 5 stars, and he wants to see it again very soon. Johnny says, ooh, Devil's Night in Detroit. Ooh, cool. All right. My favorite horror author is probably Ray Bradbury, Stephen King. Last year I read Ghost. Ghost Story. By, who's Ghost Story by? If only there was a spirit who would Google it. You know what? I'm just going to Google it myself. Ghost Story by Peter Straub. And that was a treat. So, okay, H.G. Wells. Love. All right. So I have one more story to share. If you want to see more, this will be on my exciting YouTube channel, and then I have a lot of the little Spooky Story Express, or just the shorts that are the spooky stories in short form. You can go back in time and watch all of my Spooky Story Spectacular and Spooky Story Tuesdays and all of those things. We've got Chuck's 2 different programs, and we'll be working on some exciting new things for the new year. And yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm still building on the channel and everything, but I've gotten a lot of views and a lot of great feedback, and most importantly, we've had a ton of fun working on it. So bringing wholesome content to the masses, to the thousands, to the 3,000 people that have viewed our stories and our shorts and our videos. So thank you to everybody for supporting, and please like and subscribe. All right. So I wanted to talk about the Villisca axe murder house tonight. Just tell my little story about my experience there, because it gives me a chuckle, as something like the Villisca axe murder house would, right? So that is the site, if you didn't know, in Villisca, Iowa, of the brutal killing of an entire family of people around the turn of the 20th century. Oh my goodness. I wasn't prepared to actually talk about the Villisca axe murders. I was only prepared to tell my personal story, and that is me being silly. So yes, so it left 8 dead. I was going to say 12, which would have been a terrible misspeaking. So yes, 8 people dead, 6 people, so 4 children and 2 parents. the Moore family, and then 2 little girls who were friends of the family that were staying over for a sleepover, and this was in 1912, and everybody was killed in their beds, died in their beds, with only one of the little girls showing any signs of a struggle. And they never found out who did it. There was a rash of axe murders across the Midwest and also the South around this time. It's unknown if they were related. There's some speculation that there were. This is a house that you can still go and visit, and paranormal enthusiasts will rent the space out to stay there for overnights. And I did this in 2012 with the group that I was part of at the time, called the Chicago Paranormal Seekers, that I co-founded with some folks after we left on good terms, the Chicago Ghost Hunters group. Super fun times. I remember having an ethical dilemma about whether I actually wanted to go to the Villisca Axe Murder House, because it's a teeny tiny place that felt, it's a small home, somebody's personal home, or something very personal happened to all of these people. It's different in a way than visiting a larger location like a prison or a hospital, or a place that has these more, nebulous, oh, there's a story that somebody may have died here, or, someone died in the home of cholera or something, which was very common in the past. This felt like, I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to go. It felt a little exploitative to me. Of course, I ended up paying my $80, and I went, and we had a really interesting night. So I remember sending this is kind of an excerpt from an email that I sent to Troy Taylor. So I had read his book also, Murdered in Their Beds, which is a long and very detailed history, including like court transcripts and things from the aftermath of the Villisca Axe murders. And please, if you're not familiar with it, go and look it up. I butchered the details, but it's a really fascinating case, and he put a lot of the history together really well. So he and I were going back and forth about some other things, and I was like, I just need to tell you this crazy story, and I think you all are going to laugh too. So I just finished Murdered in Their Beds, which was everything I had hoped it would be. And I had to share my experience at the house. I went with a group back in 2012, and like you, I generally like to be more of a fly on the wall when it comes to paranormal investigation than actively participating in an overly structured event. I also had something of an ethical dilemma about going, but ended up being happy, in quotation fingers, that I went. This was around the time of peak dude bro television influenced ghost hunting, and I think Villisca had recently been on Ghost Adventures, so the whole I Am Legion thing was very hip at the time. Those who remember will remember. We had a guy in our group, bless his sweetheart, throwing up on the lawn by 10 p.m. after he complained of pain in his neck, and getting a response on the spirit box of Legion or something along those lines. I wasn't present for that. I was in the little outhouse area while the other group was inside the house. It was like 3 and 3. And then shortly after that, when we were all in the house together, Courtney, Dubrow, those who know. But when we were all in the house together, a group of kids came by and were knocking on all the windows and doors like in The Strangers. The caretakers of the house actually came out of their house and they ran them off the property. But my soul left my body multiple times during that ordeal, because this was an actual group of real living humans that were knocking on the door. And I thought we were all going to die. And of course, they just wanted to know, like, hey, what are you guys doing in there? Like, does it cost something? Like, can we come in? Like, who are you? And like, it was funny and not funny at the same time. So we kind of settled down soon after all of that, and we set up our sleeping bags. And by 11 p.m., folks were pretty much out. So I've learned since then that there is this thing called like paranormal apathy. It's like not uncommon when people go into these like intense investigation scenarios that they actually get really sleepy and sometimes just go to sleep. You've rented this place for the whole night, let's go hard. And then they end up kind of just like conking out. So I was kind of amped up, and I was disappointed that we were all, suddenly in bed. I was also the last person to get my sleeping bag together, so I was the person on the far end of the cluster of folks closest to the kitchen. And with my little eye line, trust me when I tell you that my sleeping bag was over my entire head, and all I was doing was looking out with my eyes like this. My line of sight was right into the room where the sisters were killed. I slept for probably about 10 minutes and spent the rest of the night listening to every sound. But I had set my alarm for 3 a.m. to go and do another session upstairs in the attic with our friend Christina, who was sleeping next to me. And I had recalled hearing a theory that the killer had hidden in that attic room, or that room had been particularly haunted. So I did not need to wake up when the alarm went off, because I was awakened around that time by a shrill scream coming from the upstairs. It was a man desperately crying out one word. It started and it ended, and it was so abrupt and so fast that it sent like a chill through my body, but it was just very like, there's a voice. And it sounded like he was yelling out the word Zach. Troy had a lot to say about that, and most of it was raucous laughter. So this voice came just once, and it was so fast that I almost wondered if it even happened. But I heard it like reverberate, across the walls. And then Ryan, who was across the room from me, our friend who had puked earlier on the lawn, he stirred in his sleeping bag and kind of sat up. And so I was like, hey, did you hear that? And he said, oh yeah. And everybody else was dead asleep. So I was telling Troy in this email I sent him that I hope I would come across a Zach somewhere in his book, in the court transcript, somebody somewhere, a character, but I didn't find anybody that was actually named Zach that was a part of it at all. And so I know we're all thinking right now about whose name it could have been, but I have nothing to say except that that's the name that I heard. So nothing really happened during the 3 a.m. session. So I nudged Christina. She got up with me, the only one who got up with me, and we went upstairs. There's still like axe marks in the wall and stuff like that there. It was very intense. Sometimes in those intense situations you laugh, or you laugh uncomfortably. So I did manage to sleep for the rest of the night after that. And when I woke up around 7 a.m., I was lying directly under this. There was this really cool, so there was a furnace in the living room, and then directly above it was this ornate kind of grate that would have helped the heat from the lower floor travel upward into the upper rooms. There's no electricity in the house or anything, even to this day. And so pretty much I was just staring up through that grate into the children's room upstairs. And I remember just very sort of serenely watching the shadow of a ceiling fan turning very slowly for several minutes while I was kind of waking up and gaining consciousness. And I didn't think anything of it. I just watched the shadow of the ceiling fan go round and round. And then later, when we kind of got up and got ourselves together, we went upstairs to do one more like morning round of investigation. Since everybody slept all night except for me and Christina, it dawned on me that there's no electricity in the house. There's certainly no ceiling fan upstairs. There's nothing on the ceiling. So what I had seen, what I had interpreted, was very clearly the shadow of the ceiling fan blade sort of rotating lazily. And it gives me chills to think about, and chills when I was writing this, this email to Troy, thinking about if I was seeing this shadow of someone very slowly, as if kind of warped or suspended in time, swinging an axe. So we did get one cool photo while we were there too, which I'm happy to share with anybody who is interested in seeing it. The original one is infrared, the black and white photo. Like, it was an infrared photo taken from somebody's, I think, film. And then I just used, this is 2012 Amelia. So 2024 Amelia is not technologically sufficient, as you can see, because I'm on Facebook Live. 2012 Amelia just used like a black and white filter to show the contrast of what looks like a baby standing up in its crib and looking over the side at Cinda, who is taking the video and the photo. So the youngest victim was a little baby boy. All the photos before and after did not have this anomaly in them. And so I remember when we left, we kind of everybody sort of drove home feeling a little bit disappointed, like not much had happened while we were there. But in hindsight, and as we talked more and more about it, over time, I have come to appreciate, honestly, like how incredible that experience actually was. So, Susie, you have a question about whether the, and yeah, no, I totally got through the typo, that they thought it might have been a traveling salesman. There were many suspects, including people who had even confessed to the murders with details, and nothing ever kind of panned out. So one of the things that happened was, when the family didn't emerge early in the morning after they had been killed, obviously, the neighbors were kind of concerned. They were used to seeing, like, Sarah and Josiah Moore, who were the mom and dad in the family. They were used to seeing them out and about in the morning, taking care of the kids, taking care of the livestock. When they didn't come out, they were like, something's got to be wrong. They ended up, finding this crime scene in the house. And this is small town Iowa, small town Midwest in 1912. As soon as word got out through town that this murder had occurred, before detectives and police and everybody could even get there, people were tromping through the house. There were stories that people were like dipping their handkerchiefs in the blood and brains of like Josiah Moore, taking souvenirs. So by the time the police got there, the crime scene was like completely contaminated. And all they really had to go on was like thinking about, okay, there was a train stop that was right there. There were different people coming and going. There were transients. There was one guy that had been a preacher, and he was a little questionable. And so there were many different types of folks that could have fit the bill and that had contact with the family and or were suspects in other like this like rash of axe murders that had happened across the Midwest. Nothing ever really came to fruition, and even with all of the research that has been done over the years, nobody really has like a firm conclusion. It's like once you feel like you've gotten to that place where you're like, I really think it was this guy, the process kind of starts all over again with the reasonable doubt and the what ifs and everything. So to reiterate, since I stumbled over the history when I first got into the story, this happened in 1912, Villisca, Iowa. We had Sarah and Josiah Moore, who were mom and dad, and then the children who were killed in this incident were Herman, 11 years old, Catherine, 10, Boyd, 7, and Paul, 5. And that was the person that was in the child, like the baby, I mean, I said baby, but like a very young child that looked like it had appeared in our photo. And then Lena and Ina Stillinger, who were 12 and 8, were staying over with the family after like a church gathering. They were having a happy sleepover, and this terrible thing happened, and it's still considered one of the most gruesome and brutal murders. And the house for a long time had a really gruesome looking sign in front of it too that was not very tasteful either, and they have since replaced that sign. I mean you can still do investigations there, but I think all the ethical dilemmas that I had at that time, we've all kind of gone through at this point. So people who are preserving these historic sites and people who are into the paranormal now are a little more woke about things, if you will, and also just more careful, putting things into better perspective and treating these sites with a little bit more dignity and grace and respect. And so I felt very lucky that we had the opportunity to be there. And yeah, thanks, Susie. Really interesting. So there are 2 questions before we wrap up, and I'm doing so good. I'm under an hour. Unlike, hey guys, let's do a half hour, and then an hour and 40 minutes later, Amelia's still talking. The 2 spooky talk questions that we had tonight were, what places do you expect to be really haunted? So you can think of a specific place, or you can think of just a nebulous place. Like, do we think graveyards might be haunted? Do we think abandoned hospitals might be haunted? And the other question was, who is your favorite horror author or science fiction author? And at this time, I will also take other comments and questions. I will wait 1 minute. Let the comments catch up. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. And I'm really excited about, I've got some cool filming events and interviews coming up for the tail end of the year and the beginning of 2025. We've got more fun stuff planned for our YouTube channel. And then 2025 is going to be exciting with events and also writing projects. I've worked on a lot of research this year with the legacy of lore. So understanding the importance of ghost stories in our lives, culturally, throughout time. Now is an interesting time. And then also exploring the meaning of ghost stories in my own life, and sort of exploring why I am doing this and why I've been doing this for 15 years and why I continue to do this. So I do want to thank everybody again and remind everybody that I do have my virtual tip jar below, just in case you want to toss me a coffee or a box of tissues, since or more allergy medications. And Larry asks, who is your favorite paranormal investigator from the Chicagoland area? Well, I feel that my back is against the wall if I don't say Larry Eisler III. But I definitely, gosh, that is a really great question. Well, Ursula Bielski was my mentor, and Tony Zabelski and Jack Chavez are doing really cool stuff right now. Adam Seltzer I'm a big fan of, and it's just so cool to be a part of this community and to see new faces growing, and to see new and up and coming voices and women and everything being more involved, and more respected and included, and it's just a really awesome time. And Susie asks, what are we doing on Halloween? Girl, nothing, not a damn thing. We are going to take Oscar out for his annual his annual costume photos outside with the really cool Halloween decorations in our neighborhood. And we're going to watch horror movies. Absolutely not going to watch Terrifier 2. Not at all. Just enjoy the day. So I always save Halloween as a special day just for myself and for Jonathan. So my laptop is running out of battery, which I think is a sign from the spirits that I should wrap it up. So Johnny also says, Ursula, and please feel free to continue to leave comments. I'm gonna plug this bad boy in, and I'll catch up with everybody after I hop off the live. So I just want to thank everybody for joining me for another wonderful and fun year of spookiness, and a fun spooky story spectacular too. Johnny says he's been watching Agatha all along. We haven't gotten to that. We're still on Grotesquerie, which we're a little meh about, but we're getting through it. Evil was a fun show that we have also been watching. What else? We watch all the murder shows. My God, I can't get enough of those podcasts. Astonishing Legends, as always, you all know. Mr. Ballin and all that good stuff. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. And yes, of course, Richard Crowe, the OG. I've been to his grave. I didn't get the chance to meet him before he passed on to the other side. A few more comments coming in. I'm going to pop off. You all have the most happiest Halloween ever, and I will catch you on the flip. All right? Love you guys. Mwah!